Welcome back to the Practicing Leader podcast. My name is Parul Bhargava, and today, in this week's episode, we'll be talking about frustration at work and what you can do to show yourself as a practicing leader when you're dealing with frustration at work. Let's discuss. I can't say that I do not get frustrated at work. It happens to all of us, and it is normal for it to happen. The question becomes is how do you actually show up and be a practicing leader for everyone else in the room, even when those types of things do happen? Being able to show up as your best self on a regular basis and be able to hear the message instead of listening to the delivery is a difficult thing to do. It's something that takes practice and takes effort and often will push you a little bit. And that's okay. That's what's happening. You're growing. It happens. Very similar to the podcast we talked about crucial conversations, this is a similar context of being able to understand the signs of frustration and be able to recognize them in yourself. If your ears are getting warm, or the hair on the back of your neck is standing up, or you're becoming angry or irate, or you're beginning to raise your voice, you just might be getting frustrated. Being able to identify those things and recognize those signs is an important first step. When you begin to notice these things in yourself, take a moment and think about what is the outcome you're looking for. This is where I've often asked this question of do you want to be right or do you want to do right? It's an important question to ask when you begin feeling irritable or begin feeling frustrated with a situation. How do you actually figure out what the right outcome is? And not right just for yourself, but right for everyone. And sometimes that means you say, I don't know. You say that's maybe my approach isn't the right approach. You take different ways to be able to try to tackle this, to be able to make sure the actual right outcome happens. And you do your best to be able to show up the best you can. When you're trying to practice leadership and you're trying to show up the best way you can, maintaining composure is important. The behaviors that you're exhibiting are going to be viewed and set a tone for the rest of the team or the rest of the people you're working with. Being aware that you exhibiting frustration or losing composure actually has a much deeper impact that you'll have to then rectify at a later point. The way to avoid that is to begin looking and say, okay, well, how do I maintain composure? How do I limit how frustrated I may or may not be? So that people in the room can say, oh, look, I said something that was not right, but give them space to be able to make that error or make that mistake and be able to also recover. Because this is where you're trying to give them space to feel safe to speak. And sometimes folks do not use the right words, folks do not do the right thing every single time. So giving them the space and maintaining your composure will help them feel safe in being able to speak more freely. When you look at frustration, generally speaking, it actually is an opportunity to figure out, is there a place where we can actually problem solve? Is there a way for us to try to tackle something together to figure out how do we begin addressing issues? Taking a step back and figuring out, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do next, or here's how we're going to identify the root cause of that frustration or that friction point. Finding that problem and then be able to say, oh, look, we could try to solve this problem together. How do we figure that out and be able to put that in front of everybody to make sure that everyone is engaged to be able to help solve that problem? This is what leaders can actually set themselves apart. If you find yourself frustrated, this may be an opportunity to be able to begin seeking input. One of the things a practicing leader would do is how do you find people that have diverse perspectives in order to be able to figure out, is there a different way to be able to view this same problem or the same frustration from a different perspective? Is there a way to be able to help solve this in a way that allows us to be able to solve the problem together versus trying to solve it on our own? Where something might be frustrating for you, it may be right up somebody's alley to help them, to have them be able to provide, oh yeah, I ran into this, I did this, I solved this. It gives them an opportunity to be able to share their life experiences with you as well to help shape what a better outcome could be. When there's frustration or there are friction points, one of the more important things you can do is being able to communicate effectively. This is about making sure you're communicating what's going on, how things are working, what things aren't working, and having an open and honest conversation about what could we do differently. This does require for both parties to be engaged and both parties to what both is a relative term. It could be multiple parties, dozens, whatever. But it does require everyone to be engaged in wanting to solve towards the same problem or solve towards addressing that frustration point. The key is to have extra care towards being clear, respectful, and being trying your best to solve the problem for everyone's benefit, not just your own. It's too easy to say, well, this is what works for me, and that's what I'm going to stick with. That's too easy. That's the easy path, and anybody could do that. The challenge, and where I think everyone has an opportunity, is how do we solve this problem in a way that is beneficial to all parties and actually takes all parties' interests in account? Simply saying, well, I want it this way because this is what I want, that's an easy thing to do. That takes no effort. Serving your own interests is easy. Serving others is where I think the benefit comes in. And finally, the last one here in terms of being a leader for your group of people or for this space that you're in, maintain perspective. There are things that are good in the short term, there are things in the medium term, and the things in the long term. Leaders are needing to look at all three to be able to figure out what is the right outcome we're looking for and make sure that you're bringing all that information to bear when you're trying to make decisions that may have some frustrating components to it. Everyone gets frustrated at work. It happens to all of us. Being able to step up above that and trying not to exhibit that frustration, to not show up that way, and to instead try to figure out how do you bring everybody along is what makes you a practicing leader and makes it possible for you to be able to show up as your best self. Thank you so much for listening to the Practicing Leader podcast. I'm your host, Parul Bhargava, and I'll talk to you next week.